Hello and welcome to today's event. Protect your heterogeneous application and data services. How Nutanix Private Cloud enables business continuity and disaster recovery. This event is part of the 5-part Nutanix Better Together webcast series brought to you by Nutanix and produced by Actual Tech Media. Now, before we get started, there's a little bit of housekeeping that you first need to know about. We want this to be an educational event, so we encourage you to use the questions box on your audience console. If you look at the Handouts tab just to the left of your slides window, it's there that you'll see the word questions. If you click on questions, you can ask all your questions related to today's topic in that window, and we'll be doing our best to answer those questions during today's event. We also have a number of handouts that are available to you there, as well as some links in the Handouts tab on your audience console. As I mentioned, this event is part of a 5-part series. Hopefully you've been able to attend all 5 parts, but if not, when you registered for today's event, you should have received a link to the past events in the series. To remind you, the first event was the Journey to the Private Cloud on January 14th, followed by How Nutanix IT uses software-defined storage for simplicity and flexibility on January 28th. And then on February 3rd, you learned how Nutanix helps you to calm choppy IT operations. And now you're watching the 4th event in the series covering disaster recovery and business continuity. The final and 5th event in this Better Together webinar series will be on March 19th, Why Security Can No Longer Be an Afterthought When Building Your Private Cloud. Today's moderator is Mr. James Green of Actual Tech Media. To remind you how the prize drawings work for this Better Together webinar series, any person who registers for and attends any one of the events in the 5-part series will receive a Tango gift card as long as you meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions, which can be found in your Handouts tab or at events.actualtechmedia.com. And then we have 2 grand prizes. They are 2 16-inch MacBook Pro laptops. And every time you attend an event in the series, that's another entry for these grand prize MacBook Pros. Now, if you recall, we gave out the first MacBook Pro on the January 28th event, and we'll give out the final and second MacBook Pro on the March 19th event. So by attending today's event, you're increasing your odds for that grand prize drawing. As I mentioned, you must be present on the live event to be eligible for the drawings, and all grand prize winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media. And without further delay, I'm excited to kick off today's event on how to protect your heterogeneous application and data services with Nutanix. Today's presenter is Mr. Ed Collins, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Nutanix, and he's joined by Mr. Dwayne Lessner, Senior Technical Marketing Architect at Nutanix. Ed and Dwayne, take it away.
Thanks again for joining us. My name is Ed Collins, and I'm a Senior Product Marketing Manager at Nutanix. And today I have the good pleasure of presenting to you a Nutanix Private Cloud solution that is business continuity and disaster recovery. Here's what we'll be discussing today. We'll begin by looking at the state of the disaster recovery and data protection market. Then we'll look at how Nutanix's Private Cloud Hyperconverged infrastructure solutions address market needs. Next, we'll dig a little deeper into specific Nutanix solutions, beginning with our core disaster recovery solution. Then we'll look at disaster recovery as a service, which is a subscription-based native extension to the core disaster recovery solution. And then finally, we'll look at how Nutanix has brought hyperconverged infrastructure functionality to the secondary storage market. While organizations are busy dealing with the serious challenges of mass data fragmentation and things like suboptimal data protection strategies, large-scale disasters are actually on the rise. As you can see in this graphic, over the past 3 years, there's been a steady increase in natural disasters as well as man-made disasters. In fact, during 2018 alone, the U.S. experienced a very active year of climate disasters, costing around $14 billion. Additionally, unplanned outages due to system failure, cybercrime, human error, these things are also on the rise. For example, recently Facebook had a massive meltdown that lasted around 12 hours as their spokesperson stated, quote, a routine maintenance operation accidentally triggered a bug that plagued individual users as well as businesses and organizations for hours. So with these very real threats on the horizon, it's imperative that customers be cognizant of the cost associated with downtime. As per Gartner, the average cost that businesses incur due to downtime is $300,000 per hour. Now, granted, there are a large degree of variances based on the characteristics of the business, but nonetheless, the threat is real and it must be dealt with. So here are some of the typical damages that we see. There are legal and regulatory costs associated with disaster. There are end user productivity issues, the cost of recovery, damage to one's reputation, of course, data loss, and then also lost revenue. So the thing is that a sound disaster recovery and data protection plan is a requirement for businesses that need to meet increasingly stringent business continuity and disaster recovery plans. So let's begin by looking at some of the key challenges that companies face today in the disaster recovery and data protection market. For starters, disparate solutions still dominate. Traditional data protection solutions, for example, are comprised of a patchwork of point products from a variety of vendors. It's not that the individual products are inferior, rather it's a solution level challenge that must be addressed holistically in order to be truly effective. Multiple vendors do offer point products or point solutions for things like high availability, backups, disaster recovery, target storage, and long-term data retention. However, integration and maintenance remains complex in these scenarios. Secondly, cloud readiness is stunted. What I mean to say is that companies are trapped in traditional backup infrastructures that were never really designed to embrace the cloud. Some do have a cloud footprint to speak of, but the reality is that due to management complexities, the hybrid cloud nirvana isn't really met. Cross-cloud management must be unified in order to be most effective. Third, disaster recovery and data protection is often an afterthought. Upon close inspection, it turns out that many companies treat these things reactively instead of proactively, as should be the case. And then finally, recovery can be unpredictable with traditional solutions. In the absence of the ability to, say, test a disaster recovery solution regularly, it's impossible to possess confidence that the solution will work when it's actually called upon. And not only is this a risk to the business, it also is perceived as a risk to constituents like insurance companies who might jack up premiums due to lack of compliance or assurance of the solution itself. There are three key tenets to a sound business continuity and disaster recovery solution portfolio. They are to protect, to replicate, and to recover. To meet the ever-increasing demands placed on IT, companies must adopt a protect everything strategy in the sense that they must protect all of their data all of the time. As you know, data exists in a dynamic way inside virtual machines as workloads churn it. These workloads are constantly producing data, often in massive amounts. So this data must be protected at all costs, or at least in a manner consistent with business continuity and disaster recovery plan metrics. Typical data protection must be instituted across virtual machines volumes, files, and objects? The good news is that Nutanix Hyperconverged infrastructure does just that in the most elegant of ways. Furthermore, once a data protection plan has been deployed, data must be replicated to secondary locations in order to protect a business against disaster. There are several options available as target disaster recovery sites, whether it's to the public cloud, to a private cloud, or to a distributed cloud. Nutanix customers have the flexibility to choose which type of solution suits their needs. So whatever the case may be, companies may rest assured that the three key tenets to a sound business continuity and disaster recovery solution to protect, replicate, and recover, these things may be met. So let me introduce you to the Nutanix suite of solutions in the area of disaster recovery and data protection. Nutanix has a comprehensive range of disaster recovery and data protection solutions available today. Nutanix has been a leader in the hyperconverged infrastructure market for years, having pioneered many of the benchmark technologies that have modernized today's data centers. With Nutanix compute, storage, virtualization, and networking are hyperconverged into a self-healing data fabric that is managed through a single pane of glass. So it's really important to remember that Nutanix hyperconverged infrastructure is the starting point for our discussion today. From the ground up, Nutanix software stack provides resiliency among virtual machines. In other words, if one node is failing, others will pick up the slack automatically and without any manual intervention required. And as an extension of this core architectural philosophy, secondary data centers, when provisioned, become a native component of the overall self-healing data fabric. Again, all of this is managed through a single management interface we call Prism. Furthermore, by taking virtual machine snapshots based on customizable RPO metrics and replicating them to secondary data centers, the system also affords businesses reliable failover during disaster events. We call this disaster recovery technology LEAP. LEAP is a simple-to-use disaster recovery service that features protection policies and recovery plans to automate failover and failback scenarios, whether planned or unplanned. Now, depending on the needs of a business, a variety of LEAP disaster recovery solutions are available, as you see there in the graphic. Whether it's asynchronous or what we call async LEAP, where the RPO is an hour, or near sync, where RPO is around a minute, or Metro, where RPO is 0. Each of these solutions are zero touch, meaning once configured, no manual intervention is required to ensure data protection is occurring. The only thing left then for a user to do is click once within Prism to fail over in the event of a disaster. This is very different from traditional disaster recovery and data protection solutions where orchestrating a response to a disaster is arduous, requiring lots of manual intervention. With the Nutanix LEAP solution, things are very different. We've eliminated the stress of orchestrating a failover scenario by taking care of all the details for you. This solution also ensures your service level agreements are met. And for peace of mind, Nutanix provides non-production environment disaster recovery testing, which is critical, of course, but historically time-consuming, often completed over the weekend. Failover testing can be accomplished without affecting normal business processes. And what this really means, the good news is that you're able to comply with regulatory mandates and still keep your weekends free. Now, if a secondary data center, say, is too CapEx heavy, Nutanix LEAP technology can be extended to include a pay-as-you-go disaster recovery as a service solution we call XyLeap. XyLeap uses a global footprint of public cloud data centers that are owned and operated by Nutanix. Since Xileap uses the same Nutanix software stack as the on-prem data centers do, integration and onboarding is completed often in under an hour. And then finally, I want to mention Nutanix's storage backup solution, Nutanix Mine. Nutanix Mine is purpose-built to address the need for an integrated data backup service. Mine offers one-click data protection and archival, and it also offers industry-leading integrated solutions with Veeam and Haiku. In fact, Nutanix has a stable of ecosystem partners for backup. So we've seen the solution level perspective. Let's take a moment now to look a little deeper at how Nutanix provides invisible infrastructure to our customers. Some disaster recovery and data protection situations demand the very highest level of protection, for example, with business critical apps. A great example is a 911 service. Now, imagine you're running emergency services where the availability of your IT infrastructure is going to save lives. You have to be operational 24/7 by 365. Well, how do you ensure that? Well, for starters, your IT recovery metrics need to be 0 RPO and 0 RTO. How do you achieve that with Nutanix? The answer is Nutanix Metro Clusters. Metro Cluster is a zero-touch, high-availability solution across 2 sites, separated by 5 millisecond latency, ensuring 0 RPO and 0 RTO. Now, metro clusters aren't always easy to implement and deploy because of geoeconomic reasons like distance or fault lines, etc. Metro speeds may not even be a requirement in the first place. So we have other options to address less demanding requirements. We have what we call near sync technology. Now, near sync means near 0 RPO service level agreements. With near sync, your maximum data loss is 1 minute, and you still get the one-click experience across multiple hypervisor deployments. Just to summarize near sync, this includes minimum data loss, given the fact that it's a 1 minute RPO. It's very cost efficient for non-business critical apps. And then finally, it's easy to deploy and scale since it's a native Nutanix feature. Finally, to close out our Leap disaster recovery portfolio, for some companies, building out a new data center isn't an option. It could be for financial reasons even. A good example is oftentimes small to medium-sized businesses cannot afford a secondary data center. This frequently results in a cobbling of older equipment together in hopes that it'll support the production workload if and when a disaster strikes. For these customers, building and maintaining another data center just for disaster recovery is not always the best use of their finances. In other words, an OpEx model would free up cash for other business activities and priorities. And furthermore, there's also the reality that many businesses are strapped with a cloud mandate policy imposed at the CXO level. So for these customers, there's a native extension to the Leap technology called Xileap, Disaster Recovery as a Service. So let me summarize Xileap from a feature perspective. First, it's built in. Xileap is a native service to Nutanix software and managed through a single pane of glass. This facilitates instant onboarding. So workloads, security, and network profiles, they're all automatically ported to Xileap. It also features one-click failover. Disaster recovery orchestration is automated, achieving service level agreements with tailor-made RPO and RTO metrics. Uh, it also boasts non-disruptive testing, where routine examination of disaster recovery readiness achieves regulatory compliance. It also provides end-to-end security using strong encryption for data at rest and data in flight. And then it's a pay-as-you-go model. There's a flexible subscription pricing model that turns CapEx into OpEx. The key takeaways, of course, are that Xileap eliminates the need for a secondary data center. Running disaster recovery as a service in Xileap completely obviates the need for a secondary site, while also considerably reducing the total cost of ownership for a DR solution. It is a subscription service with guaranteed SLAs, or service level agreements. So the implication is that there's no need for you to procure or refresh secondary data center infrastructure. And then finally, it's all managed through a single pane of glass. The entire solution is managed through Prism, Nutanix's premier management platform. So just to highlight how simple Xileap is, for starters, planning and onboarding couldn't be easier. Xileap services are native to Nutanix AOS. Protecting virtual machines, whether ESXi or AHV, is done through a single pane of glass, of course, Prism. And there are flexible VPN options. Second, gone are the days of working over the weekend to do disaster recovery testing. Xileap users can perform testing during work hours without affecting production workloads. And second, RPO and RTO metrics are not only attractive, but they are guaranteed by Nutanix service level agreements. And then finally, planned or unplanned failover is completed with a single click. Runbook automation includes all the right sequencing and delays. And then finally, the very difficult task of maintaining IP subnets during failover is handled automatically by Xileap as well. Xileap is also very affordable. The Xileap Disaster Recovery as a Service solution replaces the stack of traditional IT service requirements for disaster recovery, giving customers a greater ability to focus on other priorities. What this amounts to with Xileap is that we see an average TCO savings, total cost of ownership savings, of 40 to 50% over traditional DR deployments. Some of the key drivers for TCO reduction are there's no need to own and operate your own secondary data center. Rather, you're able to leverage the economy of scale that comes with the Nutanix Xileap Cloud. Second, there's no longer a need to worry about separate recurring expenses or even hidden costs associated with building out your own data center, like software licensing, etc. And then finally, with Xileap, the various operational burdens, such as deploying and maintaining a stack of hardware and software, all those things are gone as well. Xileap has a global footprint, as you can see in this graphic. To date, we have deployed to 6 locations, including West and East Coast United States, London, UK, Italy, with Germany and Japan both launching in March 2020. And we've also partnered with strategic direct connect providers if you so desire to meet your VPN connectivity requirements. Let's turn our attention now from disaster recovery with Leap to secondary storage. The backdrop is that legacy backup solutions present several drawbacks. For starters, point solutions are often complex. Backup solutions are typically provided by, say, 4 or even 5 vendors, siloed across dozens of different locations, and often on aging infrastructure. This adds both cost and complexity to managing these point solutions for things like backup, archival, target storage, and long-term retention. According to a Gartner report, 41% polled say that their existing backup solution is too complex to manage. The second point is that secondary data is often underutilized. Secondary data is often referred to as dark data, as no one knows where it lies, how to retrieve it, and most importantly, how to derive any real value from it. These reasons make secondary data a liability rather than an asset. And then third, data growth is causing problems. As data grows in your primary environment, there's a spiraling storage cost associated with adding capacity to the secondary environment. 45% of those polled say that is too high. Also, backup speeds are often too slow. 37% of respondents in this Gartner report say it's too slow. And then finally, at times, backup operations are completely unsuccessful. On the order of, I think it's 14% of respondents said that less than 10% of the time, backup is successful. So just to summarize all this from a market perspective, the reality is that the market for secondary storage is still dominated by traditional technologies. And interestingly, the vast majority of an organization's data becomes critically underutilized, where backup data is relegated to being data stored in archives, file shares, test and dev systems, etc., where its potential utility and its value to the business is reduced to essentially nothing. Whenever possible, it's quite beneficial to efficiently manage and mine all of this siloed data and use it in such a way that its utility is actually maximized. In other words, take a liability, a potential liability, and turn it into an asset. Nutanix aims to bring hyperconvergence to the secondary storage market, thus enabling this transformation of data utility. Allow me to introduce you to Nutanix Mine. The solution looks like this. With Nutanix Mine, we are extending the core strengths of our enterprise software stack to the secondary storage space. Mine is tightly integrated with both the Nutanix Hyperconverged infrastructure data fabric and the Prism management console. It integrates with data protection software from the likes of Veeam and Haiku, enabling this third-party software to run in a hyperconverged manner on the Nutanix core operating system. Mine is also entirely self-sufficient. It's a turnkey solution providing compute, memory, storage, and data backup. Archive tiering is also an option, such as would be the case with Nutanix Objects, Cloud, or any S3 compatible storage. And so the key use cases for Mine are data protection, recovery, compliance, and long-term retention and archival. Nutanix Mine really separates itself over industry competing solutions. Here are some of the benefits. For starters, there is a faster time to value realized with Nutanix Mine. It provides an end-to-end improved customer experience from sizing your backup environment to ordering, deploying, managing, and even scaling it out. Second, it unifies IT operations. So customers that care about simplicity and scale, and as a result are drawn towards the HCI, the Hyperconvergence infrastructure architecture, can now adopt a similar approach to address their backup and archiving needs. And then thirdly, it scales out effortlessly. The ability to expand your existing secondary infrastructure to scale with the business allows you to grow as needed. Just a few overarching principles worth noting before we close. For starters, we're able to protect your business critical apps. An IDC report says you can slash your downtime by up to 97%. the Nutanix fractional growth model allows you to scale with ease and keep up with increasing application demands. Second, you can break down IT silos with hyperconverged infrastructure. And that means you can enjoy native backup and disaster recovery services managed through the same interface. And all data centers are managed through a single pane of glass as well. Total cost of ownership is greatly reduced. That IDC report states that TCO savings of 60% are possible. And then finally, you get to enjoy the freedom of choice with Nutanix hyperconverged infrastructure. Whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, Nutanix is able to meet your needs. We offer flexible DR and data protection solutions, both native and through an ecosystem of partners. I'd like to summarize now with a few key takeaways. Number one, the business continuity and disaster recovery market poses several drawbacks to companies trying to protect their business-critical applications and data, and myriad threats to IT uptime only exacerbate the situation. Second, Nutanix Private Cloud hyperconverged infrastructure software was created to meet the three key tenets of business continuity and disaster recovery planning: to protect, to replicate, and to recover data. These objectives are met with such simplicity and elegance that deploying them is a delightful experience rather than a stressful one. Third, Nutanix hyperconverged infrastructure is architected with data protection and disaster recovery services as integral components of the overall data fabric and management plane. Number four, disaster recovery may also be natively extended to the Nutanix Cloud as a subscription-based service with guaranteed service level agreements. And then finally, we looked at how modernizing your data storage with Nutanix data backup solutions eliminates several bottlenecks while simultaneously converting stored data from being a liability to an asset. I invite you to, and I encourage you to take some next steps with us, to engage with us. You can take a test drive. You can find out more about mine. You can even schedule a meeting at info@nutanix.com or just engage with us or follow us on social media. I really do appreciate your time today, and I thank you very much and hope to see you out there sometime soon. Thanks again.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ed. And now I'm going to take some questions from the audience. So everybody, if you've got questions that you haven't asked yet, I saw some good ones come through there, but if you have questions that remain unanswered, now's the time to ask them. I'm going to pose those questions to Ed and Dwayne. Let me just start at the top here. Guys, you mentioned right at the end there that there is a free trial for Leap, I think, but I got a couple of questions about that. Can you elaborate on how to kind of test drive some of these things? I know that there were a number of different components we talked about there, and maybe you could just elaborate on what that process looks like of getting hands-on.
Yeah, I can take that. Yes, the answer is yes. For example, as you mentioned, with Leap, you can sign up for a Xi account and get 30 days or of $500 worth of usage on Leap disaster recovery as a service. Whichever happens first, that's typically done through the standard my Nutanix.com interface and the products/Leap page. All of that is entailed and outlined there for you.
Okay. How about support? So if I go all in with this solution, who do I call and how? And I think the question is actually specifically if I'm using multiple different components, am I making multiple different phone calls, or how does Nutanix support me there?
Now, one of the best things about Nutanix is that it's a single level of support for every product, service, or solution. So you're not playing tag You're not going through multiple levels of support to get to the right answer. We have one level of support, and it's consistent across the board. Also, there's no additional price for Nutanix support, as it's included in part of the price at the time of sale.
The other
Nice. Go ahead.
An interesting part on, with support comes licensing costs usually. With on-prem to on-prem, you need to have your clusters licensed with the advanced SKU, add-on, or ultimate. But if you're protecting your workloads with Xi Leap, you don't need actually any additional licensing. It's all included in the per VM pricing.
Okay, now as long as we're on the topic of pricing, how about sizing for these different solutions? Are there different tiers, or is it based on the workload itself, or how does that work?
Dwayne, you want to take that, or you want me to take it?
Free, free, free! You heard it here. No,
I don't believe
so
you.
the per VM pricing has costs for the CPU, RAM, and the amount of storage along with the retention. So there's 3 different tiers to fall into that category. Along with per VM pricing, there's a percentage of cost. So if you want to, say, protect all of your workloads, you can pay 2% of the cost of the on-prem cluster plus support and do it that way. So there's some different models to be had.
Yeah, in addition to, there's a sizer online. So if you go to sizer.nutanix.com, you can get help with sizing the solution as well.
Perfect. Technical question. When we're talking about protecting workloads, is that kind of like crash consistent replication, or is there some level of application level integration there for the protection?
Both are available. If you want application consistent snapshots, you have to install our Nutanix Guest Tools, it's automated through the Prism UI, and you'll probably have to have different protection policies. So you can have different policies based on application, or in this case, maybe just on workloads that need to be app consistent. And then, yeah, it's easy as that.
Okay, cool. Probably got time for 1 or 2 more here. You mentioned that there's some specific SLAs in place, and this is kind of getting down to the contractual level, but like what happens in the event that an SLA target is missed?
Dwayne, you can back me up on this, but the way that the Nutanix software works is it consistently monitors and reports what we would call or identify as out-of-bound conditions through the Prism management interface. And just sort of added to that, you also have the opportunity to perform live failover and failback testing in order to validate these service level agreement metrics and that they're being satisfied. So really one of the great benefits of Nutanix solutions is that system level monitoring and oversight is achievable through automation. And whenever alerts are brought to the attention of the end user, they are given complete control.
There is also we do have a Xi Leap SLA page that describes, if you get money back type of thing, but I could not recite or remember all of that off the top of my head.
Yeah, you can just go to the product/leap.
Okay, here's a good one. Dwayne, you had mentioned that you need to install the Guest Tools agent for application consistency. Neil's asking, do we have to pay for that?
No, it's included with all levels. The Nutanix Guest Tools, not only does it do the app consistent snapshot, but for just regular data protection, does self-service restore. So if you're an administrator of a VM, you can restore your files without waking up the help desk. So that's included.
Cool. Okay, last question I think we have time for today. There was a slide about 3/4 of the way through where you talked about Mine having integration with a couple of other third-party vendors, Veeam and Haiku, I think it was. Is that something that's available right now? Because I also noticed, Dwayne, that you had dropped in the chat something about you were testing some things. So just wanted to clarify, is that GA?
Yes, mine is currently available from those vendors. I was kind of just referring to a product that's about to be released in Nutanix clusters in AWS, but mine itself you can purchase today.
Okay, very good, cool. Okay, well, I think that's all we've got time for on the questions. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I was watching in the comments the whole time and lots of great feedback. It sounded like this was a helpful session for you all. So I'm very glad to hear that, and I'm sure that Ed is as well. I want to remind everybody that we're in the midst of a series here. It's a 5-part series, and there's a couple that have passed and one still to come. So we want to make sure that you get registered for that. If you go to events.actualtechmedia.com, you can find this landing page there. The final event in the series is coming up on March 19th. That's going to be with Mike on essential security considerations for building your private cloud. And that looks like a pretty interesting one too. Again, events.actualtechmedia.com to get registered for that one. Thanks, Dwayne. Thanks, Ed, for being on with us today. And thanks, everybody, for joining.
Appreciate it.
Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.